Welcome to tonight's presentation on making the most of your tree with a soft landings garden. And a soft landings garden is simply a shade garden consisting of native plants at the base of a tree. But we will get more into that later. I'm going to start off with giving some background information. And I know many of the Wild Ones members are familiar with a lot of this info, but I think it's great for new folks to hear, and maybe there will be some details that are new to you. Oops, hold on now. Okay, great. So I'm going to start off just by defining native plants, and native plants are simply the plants that are present in an area purely as a result of natural phenomena. So this means these plants weren't, planted by people. And for this reason, in most cases, it means these plants have been here for a really long time. So thousands of years at least. Long ago, these plants colonized the landscape, seeking out areas that had the soil properties that were best for their growth. And two of the soil properties that make the biggest difference are water retention and pH. So because of this, there is a really cool correspondence between maps of different kinds of soil and maps of native plant communities. And this is very true for Ohio. So for instance, this map on the left is a map of Ohio's glacial deposits. This is simply the soil that was left behind when the glaciers retreated at the end of the last ice age. And the map on the right is a map of Ohio's native plant communities. And you can see just how closely the two correspond to one another. And I really love this, how it just shows the close link between our native plant communities and the soil itself. So since our native plant communities have been here for so long, it's actually given the local wildlife time to evolve the ability to use these plants as a food source. So the native plant community, it's actually becomes the center of an entire ecosystem. In Northeast Ohio, for instance, we have the beech maple forest ecosystem. So beech and maple are two of the dominant forest trees in the plant community, but that's the foundation of this whole ecosystem of interconnected organisms that all rely on one another and fundamentally on the plants themselves. And historically, some of the organisms that would be associated with the beech maple forest ecosystem include black bears, the wood thrush, the rosy maple moth, and that's just to name a few. So how is all of our North American wildlife doing, which depends on these native plants? Unfortunately, the trends are not very good right now for a lot of North American wildlife. Since 1970, there's been a 29% loss in North American birds. So Matt, that means birds in North America are 29% less common now than they were in the year 1970. It's cumulatively a loss of 3 billion birds over that time. Bringing it closer to Ohio, our home state, there's been a 33% decline in butterflies just in the last 20 years. So we're lucky that, Ohio has actually been collecting that data. It's one of the most intensive insect surveys that's been done anywhere in North America, but it's revealed that troubling trend. And finally, bumblebees are 26% of them are threatened with extinction, including species like the rusty-patched bumblebee, which has declined by 90% in recent years. And there are a lot of factors that are contributing to these downward trends, but an international assessment determined that habitat loss is the leading threat to wildlife worldwide. So the good news is that we have a huge opportunity to restore habitat simply by landscaping with native plants in our yards. And as we'll see, that kind of, improvement that we can make and the habitat potential that we can fulfill is oftentimes highest at the base of our trees. So I'm going to talk a bit now about why are trees so important to our home landscaping. So trees are oftentimes the focal point of our home landscaping. They have dramatic size, interesting structure, and striking seasonal beauty, as you can see by this red maple in its full fall coloration. Incidentally, the springtime coloration is oftentimes really extraordinary for many of our trees. When those leaves are first emerging, they're striking colors. Now, because of the size of the trees, the wildlife benefits of the tree are oftentimes tremendous. Think about, the size of a tree compared to the size of a flower. The wildlife benefits of the tree are similarly going to be magnified. And so some of those wildlife benefits include pollinator benefits. Many of our trees are insect pollinated, so they're providing a huge amount of floral resources to many of our pollinators. Here we have the black cherry, which blooms from mid-April to mid-June, giving just a wonderful supply of floral resources to our pollinators early in the season. On the right is a picture of a large carpenter bee visiting those black cherry flowers. But there's a huge range of pollinators that visit black cherries, willows, red maples, and other native trees. Fruits and nuts are additionally an outstanding source of wildlife benefits that our trees provide. Here we have a juvenile cedar waxwing, which is just feasting on the berries provided by the black cherry. And acorns, black walnuts, and other nuts are similarly just a real boon to our wildlife. Recently, I was collecting acorns at the base of some swamp white oaks, and I was really impressed with how valuable the acorns must be, because even though they had fallen just a couple weeks prior, there were very few intact acorns left. They're really collected and gobbled up very quickly by our wildlife. And finally, one of the most important benefits that our trees, particularly our native trees, are providing is they are the host plant for a huge number of caterpillars. So trees like oaks, cherries, willows, these are all supporting tremendous number of caterpillars that are feeding on the foliage of those trees. Here, going on with our theme of black cherry, we have the eastern tent caterpillar, which is, I think you're probably familiar with it. This is during the springtime, you can see its web-like nests at the juncture of the cherry branches. And these caterpillars are a wonderful source of food to our birds. For instance, the eastern tent caterpillar is a favorite of our cuckoos and also the Baltimore oriole, which is one of my favorite birds. Even though this caterpillar is a spiny one, the Baltimore oriole has a clever way of dealing with that, and it pierces the outside of the caterpillar. And maybe a little TMI, but it just goes to show the creativity of the bird in getting its meal, and it kind of just eats it up like spaghetti. So, as important as those caterpillars are for the adult birds, they're even more important for the nestlings. 96% of our terrestrial bird species rely on caterpillars as the major food source for their nestlings. Here we have a wood thrush that is feeding its baby, a big green caterpillar that's just full of protein. Now, not all of those caterpillars, thank goodness, are going to fall prey to the birds. The ones that survive are going to continue to feed on the foliage of the tree until they are finished with the caterpillar stage of their life cycle. And at that point, they need to undergo their metamorphosis into the adult form. They need to undergo the cocoon stage. However, for 90% of our caterpillars, the cocoon stage does not happen in the tree itself, but rather on the ground at the base of the tree. So the caterpillar descends to the ground, and there in the leaf litter, or a couple inches below ground, it forms its cocoon and undergoes its metamorphosis to the adult form. So here in the center of this image, what looks like the end of a cigar is in fact a cocoon, and the caterpillar has formed the outer layer of the cocoon with some of the leaf litter. And this is a common practice for many of our caterpillars, and it just illustrates how important leaf litter is in the cocoon process. So it doesn't really look like there's much going on here, but a little bit later, and the adult emerges. In this case, it is one of our most beautiful species, the Luna moth, with a 4.5-inch wingspan and long trailing streamer-like tails on its wings. So unfortunately, the way that we commonly landscape in the near vicinity of our trees doesn't allow any of our caterpillars to actually reach maturity. So here's a picture of a magnificent Shumard oak, a tree which on its own can support the development of over 400 species of caterpillars. However, when those caterpillars are done feeding on the plant's foliage and they descend to the ground, virtually none of them, because of the way this landscaping has been carried out, will be able to undergo the cocoon stage. So because the grass here grows right up to the base of the tree and is being mowed, first of all, the ground is going to be significantly compacted. That means that the many caterpillars that burrow a short ways into the ground in order to form their cocoons are probably not going to be able to do the digging that they need to do. Secondly, there's no leaf litter. So those caterpillars that form their cocoons using the leaves or being partially concealed by the leaves as shelter, they do not have that substrate which is necessary for them. Thirdly, because the lawnmower is making frequent passes, anything that falls to the ground is going to be chopped up. So instead of landscaping in this manner, what we need to try to do is to create a soft landings garden. And the soft landings garden is simply a native plants garden at the base of the tree, consisting of plants that are adapted to the shade and allowing for the caterpillar cocoon stage to take place. Now, not only does the soft landings garden allow for the cocoon stage to occur, but it also presents an opportunity for us to provide a large number of floral resources to a lot of our pollinators by selecting shade-adapted native plants. Now, that is not always, an easy objective. The shade limits a lot of what we can grow at the base of our trees. However, there are certainly some wonderful native plant options that will be blooming throughout the season, and I'll share a few of those with you now. So starting out in the month of May, we have Tiarella cordifolia. This is a plant that gets approximately 1 foot tall, so it's definitely not over dominant, but it does like to spread and form a colony through the growth of above ground horizontal stems. And over time, it will form this really nice patch with heart-shaped leaves and very, very pleasing white flower clusters early in the season. Another plant that you can plant in company with it that will similarly bloom early in the year is Jacob's Ladder. Jacob's Ladder grows 1 to 2 feet tall, and it has these soft blue blossoms. This is really a tremendous pollinator resource for both long and short-tongued pollinators. It'll attract bumblebees, metallic green sweat bees, hoverflies, even butterflies are attracted to Jacob's Ladder. Another really nice thing about Jacob's Ladder is it has very attractive foliage, which will persist throughout the growing season, even after the flowers fade. Now, as you move on into the summer months, it can be a little bit tougher to find flowers that are blooming in the shade. So unlike sunny spaces where there are a lot of options, there aren't as many shade blooming flowers during the middle of summer. For this reason, we would recommend that you plant an ornamental grass such as bottlebrush grass. Bottlebrush grass develops these very interesting seed heads that are going to add interest to your shade garden during the middle of the summertime. Now, there are indeed some flower options for the middle of the summer, but these are primarily plants that do well in partial shade as opposed to full shade. Many times at the base of your tree, you're really more in a dappled sunlight, broken shade situation as opposed to full shade. And many of these, so these partial shade flowers are certainly fine choices. On the left, we have monkey flower. Monkey flower does very well in part shade. You could plant it on the outer edge of your shade garden or in more of those dappled sunlight situations. What's really cool about monkey flower is it has special value to bumblebees. Those flowers, they have what's called the bilabiate form, and they're difficult to open up for a lot of bees. But bumblebees have the size and strength necessary to open those flowers up and access the floral rewards. And that means when they do, there's more for them there. So bumblebees are like VIPs when it comes to visiting monkey flower. And, it's a great plant to have on hand when you're trying to, serve the bumblebees. This plant does especially well in wet areas. So if you have, the double constraints of shade and, an unusually wet situation, monkey flower is a really good choice. Now, if it's a drier partial shade area, one really excellent plant to consider for midsummer blooms is early goldenrod. So we're all used to seeing goldenrod along the sides of the road and in various places at the end of the summer and in the fall. But in fact, there is a July blooming goldenrod. And this is it, early goldenrod. It does very well in partial shade, and it also has extremely good drought tolerance. Oftentimes, the area beneath trees does tend to be extra dry because those trees are taking up a lot of the water, which makes a drought-tolerant plant like early goldenrod very useful. And as we all know, the goldenrods are keystone plants because they support so much biodiversity. You really get the full range of pollinators when you plant a plant like early goldenrod. Okay, moving on into late summer and into the fall, we have a few really nice shade options for your shade garden. These include the zigzag goldenrod on the left. So zigzag goldenrod has kind of an unconventional look for a goldenrod. Rather than having that arching pyramidal flower cluster, it has just this kind of vertical crown of flowers up at the top. It also has very handsome foliage with deeply serrated leaves. And the zigzag goldenrod is going to tend to form a colony of plants in the same manner that the foam flower that I talked about earlier will form a colony of plants. So, plant these plants in clusters, give them a few years, and they'll really fill in the space in your soft landings garden. On the right, we have calico aster. So calico aster is an excellent choice for your soft landings garden, and it provides just a huge number of blossoms. Each of its branches is lined with these many small flower heads. And what's so cool about these flower heads is they change color as the season progresses. So as you can see in this picture, the central disc area of most of these flowers is sort of like a reddish pink. What that means is there's no more viable pollen left in those flowers. This is actually a signal to pollinators so that they focus their visitation and their pollination efforts on the yellow centered flowers. After the pollen is no longer viable, the plant actually chemically changes the color of the central disc, letting pollinators know, hey, don't spend your time on this flower, focus on the yellow centered flowers. You might be thinking, well, why does the plant even bother keeping those pink centered flowers, which have, already lost all of their viable pollen? The answer is that by keeping those flowers, it has a larger floral display. So it's calling in pollinators from a greater distance. It's more conspicuous on the landscape, and the pollinators will see it. And when they get in close, they'll focus their efforts on the yellow centered flowers. So certainly a very interesting kind of phenomenon that's happening with the calico aster. And this is true of all of the asters. Next time you look at New England aster, or panicled aster, or any of your favorite asters, you'll probably see that the discs of the flower heads have different colors, and you'll now be clued in on the fact that that's a message to the pollinators about where to focus their efforts. Okay, so there are other plants that we can plant in our soft landings garden in addition to the wildflowers. And this is if we want to give more structure or more interest to that shady space. So if you want to plant a shrub, a really great option is spicebush. Spicebush is a very shade tolerant shrub. It does well in a soft landing situation. And spicebush pretty much has everything going for it when it comes to wildlife benefits. It has flowers, which it's insect pollinated, so it's offering floral rewards early in the year. It produces berries, which are lipid rich and an outstanding energy source for our birds. And it also is the host plant for the spicebush swallowtail, which has a really cool looking caterpillar that almost, I recommend that you look it up. It almost looks like, I don't know, like a little snake or something. It's very interesting. And as far as aesthetics goes, spicebush has this very mellow yellow coloration in the fall, and it can really enhance the the fall kind of ambiance in your yard. So that's a plant to plant to give extra structure to your soft landings garden. Additionally, that tree that's providing the shade above your soft landings garden, it's maybe not going to be there forever. If the tree is kind of on the decline, you might start thinking about the next generation and replacing that shade tree. If so, you want to start a shade tolerant tree right there, beneath your declining tree. And one tree that is recommended is the black gum. So this is a picture of a black gum. It is it will eventually grow to be a very large a large tree in stature, but it has, similar to spice bush and the other plants that we've been talking about, just really a broad spectrum of wildlife benefits. So it offers the floral rewards to insects. It produces berries that the birds love. And in terms of its aesthetic appeal, it has really striking fall coloration, as you can see right here. It turns this brilliant red color. So yeah, if you're thinking about the next generation of shade trees in your yard, why not plant a black gum right there in your soft landings garden? Okay, so how do you go about actually creating a soft landings garden? It's really not that hard, and that's one of the best things about it. And now is the perfect time of year to undertake this kind of a project. So what you're going to want to do is eliminate the grass or other weedy vegetation that is presently in place at the base of your tree. And one of the best ways to do this is called the sheet mulching technique. So you're just going to cover up the ground surface with cardboard, and then on top of that, rake all of your leaves onto the cardboard. You're going to want to wet this down so that things are held in place and they're not blowing away. And as is shown in this photograph, you might also want to put up one of these short, easily removed wire fences to keep things together. And really, all that's happening here is you're eliminating the vegetation which could potentially compete with the native plants that you're going to be planting, which are going to be offering all of those pollinator benefits that we were talking about. Come springtime, you can the cardboard will be very much decomposed, and you can simply cut holes wherever you want to put your native plants. Now, although you don't have to use leaves as the cover on top of your cardboard, there really are the best kind of material you can have as a ground cover or a mulch in this space. So for one thing, our native bees, they don't have any trouble pushing aside leaves and burrowing into the ground where 70% of them are performing their nesting. And similarly, the caterpillars, which are going to be undergoing their cocoon stage, they can make it through the leaves no problem, whereas something like wood mulch would potentially provide more of an obstacle. And as we saw earlier with the example of the Luna moth, many of our caterpillars are actually using the leaf itself as the outer layer of their cocoon. Furthermore, there's a tremendous variety of beneficial insects that complete one or more of their life stages in the leaf litter. Let's see here. Insects this would include are hoverflies, lacewings, assassin bugs, beetles, fireflies. The list goes on and on. They really have evolved to utilize the leaf litter. So this is a great use of those leaves that are piling up in your yard. So in the springtime, when it comes time to plant your soft landings garden, what are some of the design considerations that you're going to want to be thinking about? Well, here they are. First of all, it's a good idea to plant your flowers in clusters. So in the lower left part of your screen, you can see just one recommended arrangement. You can plant your plants in threes and spread them out 1 foot on a side. So what's the advantage of planting your plants in a cluster like this? Well, really, you're speeding up the rate at which the flowers are going to form an obvious visual attractant to the pollinators. Research has shown that when your flower clusters are at least 3 feet in diameter, you are getting an extra boost in terms of attracting pollinators. 3 feet is kind of like the cutoff at which those pollinators can see the flower cluster from a distance and come flying over. Additionally, it's a good idea to plant at least 8 species of wildflowers in your soft landings garden. Research has shown that when you have at least 8 species of flowers, you have a significant increase in terms of the abundance and diversity of pollinators that you're attracting. Finally, you want to pay attention to those other landscaping objects we were talking about, such as the leaf litter. But a couple more I would mention include large rocks and decaying wood. So both of these are going to serve as sort of other substrates where certain caterpillar species like to undergo their cocoon stage. In addition, there are lots of bees and other beneficial insects that like to nest under decaying wood and large rocks, as well as in the cavities that beetles will build in the decaying wood. So these are just some of the design considerations to have in mind when you're putting together your soft landings garden. And finally, where are you going to find the plants for your soft landings garden? Well, one place that I would recommend is Meadow City Native Plant Nursery. We do carry all of the species that were highlighted in this presentation. And although we're closed for the season now, we are going to be opening up next May, and we would love it if you stopped by. So that pretty much covers the background and design of a soft landings garden. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. Let me maybe stop my share. I think maybe I should stop share. Okay.
Thank you, Dave. I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
And I met you a couple weeks ago when I came with Jack to buy some plants. So we chatted. So
yeah,
this was great. Something I hadn't thought about was the soft landings. My question for you, around our house, we have mostly pine trees. And so as you talk about leaf litter, like we have tons and tons of pine needles. I'm trying to collect it to like make garden paths and mulch and flower beds around. But for like the caterpillars and other, I don't know much about the pine trees, about as far as who's on them, if the pine needles support them. I know pine needles have, is it acidity or something, or
the soil does tend to get acidified under pine trees. Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say that a lot of the things you mentioned could still translate to being under pine trees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that when it comes to the like the caterpillar benefit, like allowing the cocoon stage to take place, this is really going to partially have to do with how many caterpillars are your pine trees hosting. And like, while I know that the numbers are high for trees like oaks, cherries, and willows, I honestly don't know what the numbers are like for your pine trees. So like, I would say that if you know the species of your pine tree, what you can do is go to NWF Plant Finder, and that will tell you the number of moths, butterflies, and sawflies that are using your trees as a host plant. And so that'll give you an idea of whether or not these pine trees are actually, hosting caterpillars.
Okay.
If indeed they are, like, and for, I don't know, a lot of this also has to do with like the nativity of a species. So if it's like a white pine or something like that, that's like native to the region, there's a much better chance that it's going to be hosting caterpillars than if it's like a Norway spruce or like a Scotch pine or something. But anyway, if you find out that your plant is hosting caterpillars, I would say then this suggests to me that you want to stick with the native, like the natural needle litter, which is accumulating there. You don't want to, I don't think that it would really serve you to transform that ground cover to like deciduous leaves, because I think what we really want to do in our yards all the time is think about what would be happening in nature, what would be kind of like an undisturbed situation in nature. So that's what I would recommend. And it could be that you find out that, okay, so I'm not really going to be hosting a lot of like caterpillars in this space, but that doesn't negate like the pollinator benefits that you can get from planting shade adapted native plants under those trees. So like I would still urge you to have a shade garden in that space for that reason.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Looks
Sure
like
thing.
Julie was looking up for me, so thanks, Julie.
Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, which trees are best to make a soft landing garden under? Okay, so I would say that in terms of like, your benefits to caterpillars, like allowing them to complete their life cycle, the best trees are going to be the native trees, because those are the ones that the caterpillars are evolved to utilize as host plants. And B, there's like a few kinds of native trees, like a few groups that really support a lot of caterpillars. And those are the oaks, the cherries, the willows, the hickories support a lot. The way that you can get a list is if you Google keystone plants and like keystone native plants, you should get a list of what are the top tree genera, which is just a fancy word for groups of trees that are supporting the most caterpillars. And those are also going to be the ones where you're getting the most bang for your buck in terms of making a soft landings garden. But as I was just saying a minute ago, even if you find out that your tree isn't hosting a lot of caterpillars, make a shade garden under there anyway, because make the most of that space in terms of helping other invertebrates and supplying pollinator benefits. Does anybody else have any questions? Does the sod landing need to be the size of the canopy? Okay, great question. So the soft landing. If you're gonna do like, this is a situation where anything that you do is going to be an improvement in comparison to just mowed grass up to the base of the tree. So yes, it's true that if you're trying to cover the whole landing zone for the caterpillars, when they're descending from the canopy, yes, it's true. Your soft landings garden would extend throughout the whole footprint of the tree, from branch tip to branch tip. But maybe that's like too big of a project for you to undertake. In that case, I would say do what's manageable for you. And maybe it's just a soft landings garden that is like in a 6-foot radius around the base of your tree. That's a great place to start, and maybe increase it, over the years, so that you finally are covering that whole footprint and you're catching all of those caterpillars that might be dropping down to undergo their cocoon stage. Does anybody else have any questions? Well, thank you so much, everybody. Oh, here's a great resource on soft landings if you'd like to read more. Yeah, definitely. I recommend people check that out. But thank you so much to Wild Ones for inviting me to talk tonight. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you got some good information.